Hello, good morning. It's been a year since this last happened, so I guess everyone must be seated in the same place as last year, but it's a lot warmer in here. I wore this sweater because I thought it was going to be freezing like last year, but apparently it's not. So this is real security for the Mac admin, or maybe it's real security for the Mac admin. I don't know. We'll find out as we get to it. But hello, I'm Sam. I'm a security engineer at Airbnb. I focus a lot on our endpoints and internal systems, whether that's a Mac or any other platform that we have, which basically means that I'm very close to being a Mac admin, but I don't deal with Adobe software anymore. But just as I got out of, dealing with Adobe software, I guess they're discontinuing distributing Creative Cloud applications. So I guess I was holding that up. So you're welcome. So last year, I ended on this slide, which said part 2, the important one. And a lot of people thought that this was a joke, but I really did just run out of time. But that's what happens when you have a lot to talk about. So first I wanted to kind of do a quick recap of part 1, or what I talked about last year, just kind of get into the mindset of what this is really about. So what is security for a Mac admin really? It's all about reducing risk. So when you have systems deployed in an organization, you can just deploy things, but you have all kinds of risk areas. And the pursuit of security is really, or really should be, the pursuit of risk reduction. It's impossible to eliminate risk. Anybody who tells you that their systems are completely secure is wrong. So yeah, that's about. Another area that I really focused on last year was just patching. Keep your stuff up to date. That's going to be the easiest way to keep your systems secure, and just it's all about chipping off the biggest blocks of risk that you might have. If you are running your systems out of date, last year I was asking who was running Sierra 10.12.3, but this year if you're not running High Sierra 10.12.3 supplemental update on all of your Macs, you have known exploits out there in the wild. There are obviously vulnerabilities inside of even the latest software, but they're not public at this time, so they're much less likely to be exploited on your systems. So just keep things up to date. It's really simple, probably anyways, depending on what legacy systems you might have, but as much as you can, just keep things up to date. It shouldn't be so hard anymore. Encrypt everything, encrypt your laptops. There's been so many sessions about this, just do it. That's another huge block, just get it done. But also embrace new features. Apple ships a lot of new security features, whether that's been things like SIP, or now secure token is a big deal, and it goes on and on. Embrace those new features, don't run away from them, because while they might be optional today, they won't be in the future, and they really do serve a purpose for you. Audit what truly matters. So instead of being superimposing on things, audit what actually matters to you, whether that's through logging or through something as simple as having extension attributes in your JSS, or Fax and Puppet or something to evaluate things about the machines that you really do care about that you might want to fix if they aren't in the state that you desire. You can do these things in much more advanced ways with tools like OS Query, but instead of just imposing this like set of rules and thinking that they're all still the case, evaluate them continuously and fix them if they're not what you want them to be. And finally, local admin rights are thumbs up now. Like, you should be okay with this. If you're not okay with this, then I would go back to auditing things and seeing what you really care about. Keeping people with no local admin rights is, I would say, is a very false sense of security that you're giving yourself. But open things up to users. There's not really much more damage that you can do as an admin versus somebody that's not. And honestly, if you have physical access to a machine, you're an admin of that machine anyways, at some level. So that's like basically all I talked about in this part 1 or last year. So let's go on with part 2. And I promise you that this is completely verbatim what it was going to be last year. But basically what I wanted to start with was like a security TLDR. Like, if you get this, then you can go to the other session. But what you want to do to have a secure system is make it so expensive to compromise that system that it's not worth it for an attacker to do. When I talked before about there's no such thing as an impenetrable system, it really is true. If someone with unlimited resources can compromise anything, whether that's your Mac, some servers, it could be really anything. There's certainly 0 days that we don't know about yet in the current release of macOS. If someone wants your data that bad, then they can use those resources to get your data. But for common vulnerabilities, as long as you're patching, as long as you're patching and you have a good security practices, you're going to be very hard to breach. So really what it is that if your organization has a better posture than another organization, then the attacker is going to go for them. Most attackers are looking for a classification of organizations to compromise, whether that's a large organization with a lot of resources. They don't really care if it's you or somebody else. They just want something. So if you get them to go somewhere else, then it's too bad for the other guy, but it's pretty good for you. So good security practices should really be our mindset. And this will get you really a lot of the way to just doing things inherently in a secure way. So what's a Mac admin's role anyways in 2018? I feel like I wrote a job description here, but it's really 3 things. So the first thing a Mac admin does is what everyone kind of traditionally did, which was to enable the users in their organization to do their jobs. Whether that was deploying software that people needed, setting up configurations to connect to servers, or imposing scary wallpapers, as Graham showed us a couple years ago how to do, but really just enabling the business processes that need to happen in your organization. But the second role of a Mac admin is kind of a newer thing, which is that of a protector. So if you are doing all these things, you are really like the master of the Mac. I would expect a Mac admin to be the most familiar with the Mac in their organization. So they're going to know where these risks lie, account for them, and work to change them. So, there's all these technologies, but when Apple announces, when they announce File Vault, when they've announced File Vault 2, you're going to be the ones that are going to hear about that, and you should be the ones to implement them to reduce the risks within your organization. But I think the third and most important role of a 2018 Mac admin, I was just thinking that sounds like a MacBook model, is that of someone who balances both of the other roles, which is to enable and protect. And what I think is really, if you can do both of those right, you're going to propel your organization further rather than digging up a little hole and finding like a balance of those things. If you can do it right, then you end up way further than you were before. So that's what I think a Mac admin in 2018 kind of looks like. But I want to talk about, like, what if we don't do all these things? What if we don't have secure systems? Like, what can happen? So the risks of compromise that can happen if your systems aren't in a good state and something bad happens. So there's the most common scenarios, which I would categorize as an operational loss. So this could be as simple as somebody installs some common malware like MacKeeper, and it just clogs up their machine for the day, and they have to bring it to your help desk. And really, from some common malware like that, it's really just adware. You're probably not losing any data from it. You're just losing operational work. It's costing you, the hundreds of dollars and not the millions of dollars. But it could be much more beyond that. Let's say you got a crypto locker that went out to your whole organization. That's going to cost you, thousands and thousands of hours of operational loss. But ultimately, somebody who is attacking you with that, they just want the money. You'll pay them or you won't, but you're just losing in an operational manner, which can give you some financial loss. But financial loss and compromise today is really more of compromising financial systems and exfiltrating money out of there. It's fun to do with cryptocurrency, I guess, but I guess what's really more important to an organization, like you can pay a bounty, and that's not really great for your books. But where things really start to matter is when data loss comes into play. So you could have organizational data loss. This is really like internal data that you might be losing. So if your HR department is compromised and all the tax forms and all the pay information for your employees is leaked or is stolen somehow, that's really not great. That's going to make it really look bad for all your employees and make it probably hard to hire people in the future. But even worse than that is user data loss. So customer data, that's what I really mean here. So let's say you're a website or, all companies hopefully have customers. If you're losing your customers' data, that's really like the end. So we need to really be able to protect against all these different things. And you might think, well, my website runs in a completely separate environment from all of my Macs. But what is that environment accessed from? It's all of your Macs. there's a lot of jumping points, and the Macs in our environments are a very big one. But what do we want to defend against? There's really two groupings of types of attacks that we need to defend against. The first I would classify as common attacks. So these are going to be things like spyware or generic phishing that aren't really targeted at you. They might be targeted at an industry or something like that, but they're just looking to spread as wide as possible. An attacker here doesn't really care about you. They just care about, getting probably money or some fame or something there. And these are commonly going to be things that you could catch through an antivirus tool. I think in the Mac community or the Mac admin community, we've kind of discounted AV tools over the last decade or so because they've been relatively poor or seemingly of low value because at least in the past, you would install this big AV tool on your Mac and it would scan everything and it would catch nothing, or it would just catch Windows malware and you didn't really care. Today, there is Mac malware out there that is very real, but I would recommend still defending against this kind of stuff. Apple's own Xprotect does go a decent amount of the way, but you have to be very aware that there is real Mac malware out there, and I would recommend investing in some mechanism to detect and remediate that. That may or may not be a traditional antivirus, but be cognizant of the things that are running in your systems. The Mac is not virus-free anymore. We have our malware, we have MacKeeper malware, but there's all kinds of other way nastier stuff out there. I think the most common things right now are for stealing cryptocurrency wallets, which is, again, really kind of fun. But so those are the common attacks that you're going to see. But the other side of this is more targeted attacks. So when you have targeted attacks, you're going to see informed attackers who may have researched into your organization, might have some insider information about your systems. They're not just going to be sending you Word macros that aren't going to run on your Mac. They're going to be targeting you with things that they know will probably actually work against your organization. Now, targeted attackers may or may not exist, depending on what your organization does, but for larger organizations, whether that's multinational corporations or hospitals or schools, like these really do exist. I think this exists a lot in kind of science and research and development kind of areas where you may have, governments that want your data. So they have a lot of resources. And they can launch them against you, and they know that you have a lot of Macs. They're going to be looking you up on LinkedIn and seeing what kind of systems you might be using. They're going to be scanning your actual networks. They have more than just the 5 minutes against you. They may have weeks or months for the data that they need. And this stuff is going to be very unlikely to be detectable by your common tooling. If an attacker comes in and they have deep resources, they're probably going to, again, they know what you're using to manage your Macs. They probably also know what your detection systems look like, if you have any. But they're not going to be caught by a common antivirus. It's just not going to happen. The biggest way to defend against a targeted attack like this is, again, as I talked about earlier, is increasing the cost of one of these attacks, so they go somewhere else. So if we can do that, then that's the biggest thing we can do. So I've talked about prioritizing these things that chip off the biggest blocks of risk. Like, I see risk as like this ginormous like iceberg, and we have to chip little pieces off of it, and maybe we can crack it in half in some ways, but we want to prioritize the biggest things we can do. I think in kind of a classic security model, people get focused on a lot of extreme edge cases, but the way we should really think about it is to find the biggest things that we can do and get through those. So we'll postpone these extreme edge cases and instead prioritize these big things, whether that's the obvious things like you have thousands of Macs. Simply encrypting them all with File Vault is going to be a huge win for you in protecting yourself from data loss. And it's super easy. The biggest wins are probably the easiest ones to do too. So this really gets into this slide, which I believe is what I ended with on, or the second to last slide from last year, which is that attackers are really starting to target the Mac admins and the sysadmins out there because of their large access to systems, which means you're number one. Like, it's pretty cool to be number one, right? But you got to defend yourself because, like, as much as we might think so, we're not invincible. Like, you will be, somebody in here will be compromised at some point. Like, our systems aren't perfect. We strive to make them so, but at some point, one or more of us, maybe even myself, will mess up in some way. So how do I get owned? Like, let's go through some steps on how to do that. Because as a Mac admin, I want to know how I'm going to be compromised to be able to defend against that. So what not to do. Let's talk about scripts. So I think in a Mac admin's life, or really any sysadmin's life, you're going to run a lot of scripts off the internet. Now, I think a lot of people think about this in a way of, I don't really trust this script, and going to evaluate it for what it might be doing. Hey, there's some malicious, there's a lot of talk about like curl to bash, which is super common and can be, messed with because of the way that curl slowly downloads the file to feed it into the bash, and that can be tampered with. But I think really the biggest thing that doesn't get looked at here when you're running scripts off the internet is what are the lasting changes that they're making to your system that you might not realize. I've seen scripts out there which they say that this enables one type of file sharing on your Mac and it adds maybe some users to group, but it also does a whole bunch of other stuff to a whole bunch of other services. So you're like, hey, cool, this script is great, and it did what I expected it to do, but it also left a whole bunch of gaping holes open on the system. So what really is the difference between your machine before you ran the script off the internet and the one that the state after you did? And of course, we all run some scripts that don't really work. But when they didn't work, what did they actually do to your machine? Packages. So I think commonly as a Mac admin, you get requests for different kinds of software to be added to your management tool, so you can have it in Monkey or in self-service, or just like general things that you're testing for new deployments. And I know that I've seen a lot of people just take these pieces of software that they're testing and installing it on their real laptop. You can go investigate packages and see what they're really doing to your machine. But again, I've seen packages that have like 97 scripts in them that do like who knows what to your Mac. And I think the thing is here that you should really test unknown software in a different environment than the one that you use every day, especially if it's a brand new thing. Because I've seen packages that really just leave gaping holes. You get the software that you expect, but it also comes with a bunch of baggage that you didn't. And then the last piece is privileged actions. So what access have you granted to your own accounts? Obviously, as a sysadmin, you have access to a ton of systems that are really very broad over, it really depends on where your role is, but it could be as simple as Mac management tools, but you probably also have, if you have Active Directory or an LDAP, you certainly have credentials that can be used for administration there, whether that's for binding or for making changes. Like your access as a sysadmin is inherently going to be very broad. And what access have you granted to those different systems out there? And is it lasting? So I wanted to look at one which I experienced, and probably some other people did last year. I think it was in May. You may have seen this. I didn't have my original screenshots, so I stole these from the internet. But everybody gets phishing emails all the time. And there was this one that a whole bunch of people got. Commonly in a phishing email that's looking for your Google credentials, you'll click on it and it'll bring you to a fake page asking you for your username and password for your Google account. You're like, oh, this is not Google, it's obviously fake. Why is my autofill not working in my browser? And you just get out of it. It probably lands in your spam folder, so you don't even see it. Like, I think we all know what those look like. But this one was very, very, very smart. And what this was a fake Google Docs. And when you clicked on this, you clicked that open in Docs. Like, if you look at it here, like obviously that is fake. If you look at it now, but you click on it and it takes you to a real Google page. If you look there at the top of the window, that's what the URL was. It's really on Google, and it says that the application is Google Docs, but it wants these rights to your account. And so if you clicked allow here, this fake Google Docs would have full access to your email and your contacts. Now, all it really did was re-emailed itself out to everybody in your contacts list. So this spread among thousands of organizations within like 2 hours on like a Wednesday morning. And that was fun. But the real risk here is what I want to talk about here is OAuth, access to your data. So here, if this was a more targeted attack, like this one ended up being okay because it spread to many, many, many thousands of users within an hour, and an attacker couldn't possibly use those credentials that fast to do malicious things. it also meant that Google was on top of it and revoked these auth permissions very quickly. But let's say a targeted attacker came along and just made a fake Google Docs application or a fake Google Sheets application or something like that and sent it to just you or just a few users in your organization. Google's not going to catch that. They might have some scanners or something to search for like the word Google in an auth name now. But really what can happen here is you grant full access to all of your data. So for you, if you've allowed that access, you've exposed yourself. So what I want to ask is, if someone can send email as you and really read your email as well, how far could they get? I would assume as a Mac admin, as a systems administrator, you have a whole bunch of systems that you log into with your Google account or with a username and password that could probably be reset through email or through many other mechanisms. I think for a lot of us, like, email is really a de facto source for authentication. Anything and everything can be reset through email. So you open yourself up to that, like, you're done, right? So we really need to defend ourselves. We're obviously vulnerable at some level. Like, I'll be honest, I clicked allow on that Google prompt, as did many other users in my organization, because it looked real to me. I had no reason to believe that it wasn't. I'd never seen anything like that. It was just, clicking into Google Docs. You see common things like that all the time. If you're compromised, everybody else is too. You basically have root access to everybody else's laptop, which means you can be them as well. So you're a very good jumping point. One thing I wanted to say is I've seen a lot of administrators think that they're better. They might need to be exempt from some policies because they run into them all the time. So I'm smart, so I'm never going to download any malware. So I'm going to disable antivirus for myself and everybody else in IT, just to do my friends a favor. Like, maybe that's not the best idea. Maybe you're going to exempt yourselves from some kind of MFA, from some 2FA that you might have on something like a VPN, because you sign in all the time and it's really annoying. Or some other security policies that you feel like you might be better than. But I would say that's really not the best idea. What should be okay for your users should be okay for you. And as I said before, you're number one. You're a huge target. So if anything, you should have more policies than everybody else. So your own risks. So you touch a lot of systems, and you touch a lot of systems in a lot of environments. So you touch a lot of laptops. You're probably putting your credentials into a bunch of stuff. And you are also a huge target. So where have you placed your credentials? You're copying things back and forth. It can just be really hard to keep track of where you've put things. If an attacker can pivot through you, they can pivot through one of your systems. If they gain access to your credentials, then they can, go place some things into your monkey repo or go log into your JSS and make some policies that target the users that they might actually want the data from. An attacker who's targeting you might want data from a single department. They might want data from a single user. And your administrative tools have great features that can help them with that. If they want to get your CEO, they just create a smart group in your JSS to target that user. And then the policy hits that one user. It's going to be really hard to detect that unless you are specifically testing for that. So be aware and probably alert on any changes that happen in any of your management tools. So really, practice of good security practices makes perfect. You are the master of your domain. You're the master of the Mac. And so you can propel the best Mac security rather than others asking you for other things. So don't have your security team ask you to do all these things. Don't have them make all these crazy changes to your Macs and put on this huge security tooling. You really are the one who knows best about what can go on your Mac and what should be there. You need to work together, but if you can propel your Macs to be in a great state, it's going to make everybody happy, and you're going to end up in a much better situation. Make the Mac look like the secure platform that it is, so you don't have to use Windows. I think I'm skipping this slide, sorry. So passwords. I'm fear that I'm going to run out of time again. That's what happens. So security practices that I wanted to focus on. Passwords. Obviously, we all have passwords. But the thing that I wanted to focus on most with passwords is what really happens when you enter a password somewhere, into an application or a service. And what I really want you to think about is what happens when you send a password to these places. So, we can look at the code for Nomad Login and see what it does, but obviously Nomad Login has plain access to that password. When you log into some inventory system or something else that's backed by your LDAP, you don't know what it's doing with your password. Maybe it's caching it in its database as like an MD5 that can be easily reversed. You don't know. So what we really need to focus on is using unique passwords for every service. I think this is getting to be more common. Apple has gotten us to do that. But it's really even more using unique passwords for every single different service. I think over the last decade, not so much recently, there was a lot of organizations that strive to get everything to be backed by their directory services. But that means you're now setting the same password to hundreds of different things, and you don't know what it's doing with it. So if you cannot do that, that might be good. But use a password manager, so if every password you have is unique, then you probably don't have to have crazy password policies, because you shouldn't really care that much. Well, you should care, but it shouldn't be that big of a deal if one of your system's passwords is compromised, whether that's a system that is out of your control or not. But basically the point that I'm trying to get to here is that when you're sending passwords to applications, just assume that they're doing the worst with it, because they probably are. It's hard to do passwords right, and everybody wants to store them in their own fancy format, but it seems like a lot of applications can't get the salting and hashing right. So with a few dollars worth of compute, you can crack a whole bunch of passwords. So they are not great. SSH keys. So we probably SSH to a lot of systems as part of our jobs. And the most common thing you're going to do right now is, you SSH user at whatever the host is, and then you type your password. But you don't know what that system is really doing with your password unless you truly control every little piece of it. But instead of that, we can use SSH keys. And what these are a public and private key pair, which instead of saying to the remote system that, hey, I'm Sam, and here's the proof, here's my password, here's the secret. You say, hey, I'm Sam, and here is cryptographic proof that this is me. Here's my public key, send me a challenge, I'll prove through that challenge that it's actually me. You're never sending a secret over. The server can't reuse that data. So if you can use SSH keys, I would strongly advocate for this. You can put them on multiple servers, and it makes it really easy to authenticate in secure ways. They can be encrypted, so by default, when you generate one, it's going to be unencrypted and stored on your local machine. But you can encrypt it with a password, so you still do enter a password, but it's only sent locally on your machine to decrypt that key in memory so that it can be used, rather than sending secrets over the wire. You can copy them with read access, so if you have multiple machines, you can do that and have access to the same key for multiple machines, but I would not recommend this, because what that means is an attacker might also have read access to your data. Quickly, smart cards. These are very common today. If you're interested in SSH keys, I would strongly recommend getting a YubiKey or another form of smart card to generate your keys on and store them on. So what this means is that instead of your key living in a file, it lives inside this teeny tiny security module inside of this little USB dongle. And because it's inside of this hardware, it cannot be extracted or exported. It can only be used locally. So this means that it cannot be digitally stolen. It could be physically stolen from you, but these also have built-in mechanisms similar to on iOS, where if you put in your PIN wrong too many times, it'll just brick itself. So if you're concerned at all about your access being stolen by an attacker, you should secure your credentials with a hardware token. A lot of us have probably set up MFA on as many accounts as we can. People are probably very familiar with at least one of these mechanisms, depending on what coast you're from, I guess. You might have one of those RSA tokens on the bottom, or you might have something like Duo or Google Authenticator. Please set up MFA on everything, including your personal accounts. This is like the most critical part that I think a lot of people miss, is your personal accounts are a great way to jump into other things. It keeps an attacker from being you with just one stolen credential. If somebody has your password but they don't have your key, then they're not getting in. There's a ton of methods available, and they're super user-friendly, especially in the U2F form. So that's the blue one in the corner there. Please avoid the SMS methods. They are not secure. But simply keep your users safe by keeping yourself safe. Like, it's totally worth it. And when you're implementing new security policies, say me first instead of me know better. That's really the key to success here, I think. But just reassess your approach to security. If you can come to it with a different mindset, it'll be really great. And yes, I do have more slides that I didn't go over. So yeah, that's
cool.
That's the end.
So
I don't know what that was about. That was left over from last year. I don't remember what it was for.
So as usual, Samuel has always got more to talk about. But anyone got any questions for him? Oh, you had to be right at the back, didn't you? Ready? Okay.
Hello. Hey, it still works. I'm interested to hear if you have any more thoughts on antivirus. We seem to be in an knowledge is now kind of Microsoft's V is the best. Presumably the same risks exist on the Mac as do on Windows. It's a attack surface that's running kernel modules. I mean, do you have any thoughts about how to choose an antivirus product, how to evaluate whether it's actually doing more good than harm?
So on the Mac for antivirus, what I would focus on is the ability to clean up clean up malware that's been installed, and find vendors that, you know, focus on the Mac rather than being like, our engine has 1.8 million signatures for like every piece of malware since like 1995. Like, you probably don't care about that. You care about detecting things on the Mac. For like Windows malware, I would, you know, the way that that's going to spread is through email or through other documents. Like, scan on some server. For scanning on your Mac, if your vendor can just scan for Mac malware and clean it up, like, that would be totally optimal in my opinion. Apple's built-in Xprotect is good, but they're still kind of slow to update signatures for the common stuff. So I still find the need to have something else, but it's really just for like automating cleanup and not for, you know, day-to-day like on-access scanning and all that kind of stuff. If you can go beyond AV with something like Santa, like, you'll probably be happier, but it is a significant time investment to get all that stuff working.
Thanks.
So any other questions? No? No one wants to try and get this on their heads? No? Oh, just... Oh, cool.
Hi, what's your experience with Carbon Black?
Which version of it?
Any.
So I think that with Carbon Black, there are two different sides of that. They have Carbon Black Defense and Carbon Black Response. Carbon Black Defense is like a traditional AV, and Carbon Black Response is more of a process and network monitoring tool. Like I said before, I don't see a ton of value in traditional AV, but I definitely do see value in that a tool like Carbon Black Response can provide you. I think there's been a lot of, you know, there have been bad experiences that people have had with Carbon Black and other similar products that live in a kernel extension. But at this point, Apple doesn't have the APIs open for the things that you would need to live outside of kernel space. So I would recommend using a tool like that if you have a place to valuably use that data that it will give you. If you just have carbon black response, it's probably not going to be super valuable for you. Cool.
Can you talk a little bit? Is this working? Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about security certifications? Are they any use where you get somebody in to tell you and give you certificate on how good you are at being secure?
All I can say there is that I don't have any. So, I've done training for some specific products that I wanted to know more about, but I personally haven't found a need to pursue some of the security certifications that are out there. I know a lot of people that have them. I guess the place where you would need those would be some specific companies that demand them, but it really depends on where you're working. I think that's like a lot of certifications are.